They came dressed like cops, demanding to confiscate my grandson's bike over an HOA violation. But they didn't count on my 92-year-old father-in-law, a WWII survivor, waiting for them on the lawn in his uniform cap, daring them to try. What happened next stunned the entire neighborhood. But first, let's go back to the beginning. It started with a letter shoved into our mailbox. No stamp, no envelope, just a wrinkled slip of paper with a typed warning. Violation. Unauthorized object in public view. 1. Child's bicycle. Fines will be issued. The absurdity of it didn't hit me right away. I stood in the kitchen, holding the letter like it might sprout legs and apologize for its own stupidity. My grandson, Ethan, is 8. He comes home from school every day with grass stains on his jeans, peanut butter on his face, and a flushed kind of joy you only see in kids who haven't yet learned that the world can be cruel. He hops off his bike, a red Schwinn with silver racing stripes and baseball cards rattling in the spokes, and leans it against the porch. That's it. That's the crime. I turned the paper over. Blank. No contact name, no explanation, just a threat disguised as formality. It wasn't even signed. By the time I showed it to my wife, her mouth tightened the way it does when she's trying not to curse in front of Ethan. "This neighborhood's gone mad," she muttered, folding the letter like it was dirty laundry. "Since when did a kid's bike become contraband?" I chalked it up to a clerical error. Maybe some overzealous HOA volunteer with too much time and too little sense. But 2 days later, around 4:30 p.m., they came. 2 men pulled up in a white SUV that didn't have plates, just a faded decal that read, Neighborhood Safety Corps. They stepped out wearing navy shirts with stitched-on patches, cargo pants, boots. One even wore mirrored aviators and a shoulder radio that crackled ominously, though I doubt it was connected to anything. They walked up the driveway like they owned it. When they knocked, it wasn't a polite 3-tap hello. It was the kind of knock meant to remind you you're not in charge. Walter opened the door. Now, Walter may be 92, but there's not a thing about him that creaks. He walks slow because he chooses to. His posture's straight as a rifle barrel, and his eyes, pale blue and unblinking, have stared down fear far worse than any suburban cosplayer with a clipboard. The man in front cleared his throat and declared, in a voice that tried and failed to sound official, "We're here on authority of the Homeowners Association to confiscate the item in violation." Walter blinked once. "The what?" "The bicycle," the man repeated, gesturing as if describing a volatile weapon. "Left in public view." Walter shifted his cane, stepped back slightly, and nodded toward the porch. "Go on," he said. "Try it." They didn't move. Something in Walter's tone, not loud, not aggressive, just impossibly steady, made the air tighten. They didn't look at him like an old man. They looked at him like a wall. That was the moment I knew. They weren't lawmen. They were just boys in costumes bluffing their way through a game they didn't understand. And Walter? Walter had seen real uniforms, real chains, real men fall. This wasn't going to go the way they expected. After they left empty-handed, only because Walter didn't flinch, we did what any sane people would do. We called the HOA president. Her name was Connie Dalrymple, a woman with the voice of a telemarketer and the compassion of a parking meter. The moment I mentioned the so-called enforcement team, she launched into a monologue laced with phrases like municipal code compliance and community aesthetics protocol. It wasn't a conversation. It was a wall of legal wallpaper designed to suffocate protest. "We're within our rights," she said curtly. "The HOA board voted to authorize a volunteer enforcement initiative in accordance with Section 8B of our charter." She paused as if that citation should end the discussion. "These individuals have been empowered to uphold visual harmony." Visual harmony. They weren't preventing crime or maintaining safety. They were controlling sightlines. This wasn't about order, it was about obedience. They had taken the language of regulation and wrapped it around a bat, swinging it at anyone who didn't kneel to their petty kingdom. That night, Walter didn't speak a word over dinner. He chewed slow, his eyes distant, the way they get when he's sorting memories like old tools. After the dishes were cleared, he lowered himself into the recliner in the den and rested his cane across his knees, palms folded over the worn wood like a soldier gripping a rifle at rest. My wife leaned toward me in the kitchen doorway. Her voice was low, careful. "He's getting that look again." I knew what she meant. The last time Walter got that look, the cable company had tried to charge him for a router he returned in 1999. He ended up getting 2 months free and a personal apology from the regional manager. But this was different. This wasn't a billing dispute. Walter doesn't respond to aggression with words. He's from a generation that believes in standing still, the kind of stillness that forces the world to move around you. The kind of stillness that makes weak men nervous. At dawn the next morning, I heard the garage door creak open. Not the new one with the automatic motor, the side hatch Walter still prefers. I peeked out and watched him disappear into the back corner where we keep the things too heavy with history to throw away. When he returned, he was holding his army duffel bag like it weighed nothing. It hadn't seen sunlight in decades, but the fabric still held its shape. He took it into the house, quietly, and didn't say a word. By the time the so-called HOA police returned, this time with a trailer in tow and backup in the form of a clipboard-wielding man with a laminated violation authorization form, Walter was already waiting. He sat in a metal folding chair dead center on the lawn, not an inch of shade in sight. His cap was perched on his head, the eagle insignia dulled with age but still fierce. The red Schwinn stood next to him like a sentinel, its kickstand firm in the soil. His arms were crossed, boots planted. He didn't say a thing, and they didn't move, because some men command silence, and Walter, without lifting a finger, reminded them that just because the war was over didn't mean the fight was gone. Walter typed the letter on the same manual typewriter he'd had since the 50s. Not out of nostalgia. He said computers made people sloppy, careless with their words. With the typewriter, every keystroke had weight. Every sentence had to earn its place. The pages came out warm from friction and smelling faintly of machine oil and conviction. He printed 67 copies, one for every home in the subdivision. Then he walked. It took him 3 hours. Cane in one hand, the manila folder of letters in the other. He didn't slip them under doors or drop them in mailboxes. He knocked. On each and every door. And when someone opened up, he handed them the letter with both hands, met their eyes, and said only this: "Please read it. That's all I ask." The letter wasn't long, but it carried more force than anything the HOA had written in its bloated, over-polished newsletters. I didn't survive starvation, beatings, and frostbite in a POW camp to come home and see children punished for riding bicycles. I fought tyranny once. I'll do it again if I must. It hit like a gut punch. People didn't just read it. They sat down with it. They passed it around the dinner table. They took photos of it and sent it to friends outside the neighborhood. Because for the first time, someone had said aloud what everyone else had been muttering behind fences and in hushed tones at community barbecues. The HOA had stopped being about helping and started being about control. The Johnsons remembered how their daughter's sidewalk chalk, rainbows and hopscotch grids, had triggered a formal complaint. The Delgados had once received a citation because their flower pots were the wrong shade of terracotta. The Friedmans were fined for a bird feeder. The tension hadn't just been simmering, it was seething, waiting for a spark. Walter was that spark. By the night of the monthly HOA meeting, the community center was standing room only. The officers showed up, still wearing their ridiculous tactical vests and clip-on badges. They tried to hold court, speaking over the noise, demanding order, but when Walter entered, everything stopped. He didn't storm in. He moved slow, measured, leaning on his cane like it was a rifle stock. But the room stood, not out of politeness, out of reverence. He reached the front without ceremony, faced the board, and said with terrifying calm, "I fought a regime that believed uniforms gave them the right to silence people. That ends today." A man in the back, clipboard clutched like a shield, interrupted with bureaucratic panic. "Sir, this is a private association. We have—" Walter didn't raise his voice. He raised his cane, brought it down once, hard, the crack echoing like a rifle shot. "You're not police. You're cowards. Cowards hiding behind fake badges to scare kids and seniors. If my great-grandson's bicycle is such a threat to your visual harmony, then maybe the problem isn't the bike. It's what you've become." And with that, the illusion shattered. The room erupted in applause, the kind that grows like a thunderstorm, relief, rage, pride, all at once. The board was frozen, their authority dissolved not with a rebellion, but with recognition. Everyone finally saw them for what they were. The vote wasn't debated, it was demanded. And it was unanimous. The fake officers were stripped of their duties. The HOA president and her inner circle were suspended pending a full investigation, one that neighbors promised would be public, transparent, and unrelenting. Walter didn't smile when it was over. He just adjusted his cap, turned around, and walked out. Because for men like him, duty never needed applause, just results. A week later, we sat on the porch, the wood warm beneath our feet, the late afternoon sun painting everything in long amber streaks. Ethan was a blur of motion on the front lawn, his red Schwinn circling like a comet with plastic streamers fluttering from the handlebars and the cheerful ring of his bell punctuating the stillness. The air smelled faintly of fresh-cut grass and lilacs from Mrs. Delgado's front yard, and for once there was no clipboard, no threat of citations, no eyes lurking behind tinted SUV windows. Just a boy, a bike, and a quiet peace that had been hard-won. Walter sat beside me in his old metal porch chair, the one with the faded green cushion and the creaky armrest he refused to replace. He didn't speak at first, just watched Ethan make loop after loop, his eyes following each turn like he was tracing something sacred. A lifetime of discipline in that stare, not hard, not cold, but deeply measured. His hands rested on his cane like it was an extension of himself, not for support, but as a reminder of what he'd carried and what he was still willing to carry if pushed. I broke the silence with a half smile. "Did it feel like the old days?" Walter's eyes didn't leave Ethan, but the corners of his mouth turned up slightly. "No Nazis this time," he said dryly. "Just power-drunk idiots with too much printer ink. But a bully is a bully." He finally turned toward me, and there it was, that quiet steel behind his gaze, the kind of look that speaks louder than any speech, the kind that men used to follow into war zones. "And sometimes," he said, voice calm but firm, "it only takes one old man to remind people how to fight." The words didn't hang. They landed. Since that night at the HOA meeting, the neighborhood had changed. Not in sweeping, cinematic ways, but in the subtle shifts that matter more. Kids' bikes lined driveways again, helmets dangled from handlebars. Sidewalks had become canvases, chalk suns, hopscotch boxes, and dragons curling down the pavement. The bylaws were rewritten, not behind closed doors, but on folding tables at community potlucks, with laughter and argument and real consensus. And Walter? Walter became something more than just a veteran or a grandfather. He became the line. The one person who didn't flinch, who didn't ask permission to be decent. He never yelled, never threatened. He just stood. And by standing, he pulled everyone else to their feet. Not because he was loud, not because he sought attention, but because when it counted, when it really mattered, he remembered how to fight without lifting a fist. And more importantly, he reminded the rest of us that we could too.